a whole bunch of people here, but now there's only a few people here, but this is a new project for me, like I need one, for me to be able to implement some of the things that I've been talking about for a long time, for 40 years, in terms of integrating STEAM, or science, technology, engineering, art, and math into a project for the benefit of everybody else. Exciting because technology now is amazing and you can do so much. So I'm going to hopefully hook up with these people and get something done for everybody.
So I'm here tonight, so like I mentioned, my name is Brian Johns. I'm the Director of Virginia Organizing, and we do two main things. The core of our work is working to organize and build power with people who've been traditionally left out of the process in Virginia. And we leave that open to folks' own experience, right? If that's left out of the process in their local school system, if that's left out of the process at the state government level. We are deliberate about trying to engage and work and bring in and develop leaders who want to come together and work for change in their communities. And so we do that in three main ways. The most of our time is spent in local chapter organizing. And the process we do, I'm going to go back and forth with this, I'm sure. The process we do is through one-to-one conversations in the community. And so again, I say all the time, it's not rocket science, but it also is surprising how little people get asked what they'd like to see changed, what they'd like to work on. And I'd imagine some of what you all are doing is probably because either you've got ideas or it sounds like you're working with people who have ideas. People come together, they realize something needs to be done to improve our local communities. In our experience, looking at who's got power in the state and who doesn't, there are definite groups that have been encouraged not to act on their need to improve their community. That have been basically told, you don't have a role in this, or don't worry about it, or have been intentionally left out of the process of making decisions and having the ability to act. So a huge part of our work is one, asking people what they want to see changed, and then two, connecting them to other people with similar issues. Because in our experience, a lot of people in various parts of the state are dealing with the same issues. But a lot of these things are things that it's not easy to talk about, right? If I'm struggling to put dinner on the table tonight, I'm not going to necessarily be out there talking to my neighbors about that. Because of lots of reasons, I probably feel like it's safer for me to just try to figure that out on my own. So a lot of our work is trying to build public relationships. And I think that hopefully is what's kind of relevant to the work each and every one of you all are doing on your projects. We're trying to get out of the space of just, how's the weather, what's your favorite sports team doing, kind of move beyond that conversation. We also know we don't need to be in a conversation where it's really close, right? People have personal relationships for the most part, but what people seem to be lacking in our experience is this kind of middle ground relationship, where you're talking about things that matter to you because they're personal, but you're also at a point where you're able to figure out how to try to do something about it. And so our local chapters, we've got 17 all over the state of Virginia. I got involved, I was an undergraduate here in the late 90s, and our office just opened up on Harris Street like in 96, 97. We actually, FAR was upstairs. My first office was right next to FAR and a bunch of FAR interns for a long time. I was just like, I stuck around, right? So I came to UVA, I got politicized around this idea around that we had a lot of workers back then who were making $6 and $7 an hour. And cleaning rooms and preparing food. And I would go volunteer at the Salvation Army, which I just drove by on the way over here, 20 some years ago, and see guys in Virginia dining shirts, right? And then it took me a second to realize, like, wait a minute, they're unhoused, but they're also working as many hours as they can get over at the university. So I was looking for, how do I become useful, and trying to figure out how I got a lot of privilege going to a university that's benefiting a lot off of low-wage work. Somebody said, check out Virginia Organizing. And so we started back then as an organization really with the aim of building local chapters that could build enough power to hold leaders accountable. And to do that in a way that centers directly affected people. So we don't do an issue or work on an issue unless our members have come together and said that's what we want to work on. We are really deliberate about creating time for those conversations. So we build these local chapters. We've got them, one in Charlottesville, Albemarle, but we've got them all over the state, except for Northern Virginia. We don't have as many up there. But from far southwest to the eastern shore, we have groups of intentionally as diverse as we can possibly be, groups of folks from all walks of life coming together and trying to improve their local community. So what that looks like is they'll try to work on affordable housing, right? They'll come together and say, housing is a huge problem. Are there some things we can do to try to get our local decision makers to invest or to create, more opportunities for folks to have affordable access to housing? And that looks different everywhere, right? In one place it might be an inclusionary zoning ordinance where we're trying to get developers to set aside money when they develop to be set at a certain rate of affordability. In other places it's fair housing. So we worked in Petersburg to get a fair housing officer because there were a ton of absentee landlords and people were not getting any sort of response when they had problems, and rents would go up and there was no accountability there. So we leave room for flexibility, but first and foremost we're asking people what they want to work on. A huge core of our work is also this idea that we've got to be working to actively dismantle racist systems, whatever the campaign is that we're working on. And I was benefiting from, like, our members, some of whom are still involved in the early 90s, saying wherever we are, we've got to figure out how to talk about how race has affected the situation. And so can we build multiracial organization that works to dismantle some of those systems? So that's just for some background context. We also, based off of that local work, we also do what we call power analyses every year, where we're asking people who has power and who doesn't. And I'd argue some of this, again, it's not, you don't need a doctorate to do some of this work. A lot of it is just asking questions, right? Who are our city councilors? Who are our county supervisors? Who is our school board? Who do they know? Who do they listen to? Can we build enough relationships? Can we see where there are things that other communities are doing that we can bring here and suggest? And so it's very relational. And it is really, and we just had 2 organizers start 2 weeks ago. Their whole job for the next year is to do as many one-to-ones as possible and to really ask what people want to see change. So I'd argue, it sounds like a lot of the work you all are doing with your projects, some level of that you're either already doing, or I would say it's worth trying to figure out how to do that, right? How to, even though, in our experience, that's not something funders necessarily want to fund very much. It's not something that's really provocative, but for us, it means a lot because we don't start working as a chapter until we've done about a year's worth of conversations where we've really deliberately engaged and also developed leadership locally. And I'd say a lot of our folks are folks who have never been active before. We're not necessarily looking for kind of current community leaders, although we've got some of those. We're looking to work with lots of people who maybe have been told that they shouldn't be involved in this work, but we say actually it's not that complicated, let's come together and figure something out. So we do that. We also do statewide work. We do a ton of leadership development. So we ask people after they're involved for a little while, what do you want to learn? And I did undergrad at UVA. I grew up just south of Richmond, and I learned more in my first hour and a half at the General Assembly than I did in studying government and studying all these things, in class, right? And I say that to say all the time, we're all experts in our own experience. And we really believe that if we're going to work for change, whether it's on the local level or state, there's a real place for people, not just to be, asked to come and speak or to share their story and that's it. We want people to come because they're engaged and they're getting something out of it. And that they also realize, hey, all we got to do is get, maybe 4 of these 7 Board of Supervisor members to agree with us on something. That's a lot more digestible than, wow, these issues are so big and I don't have time to really look into it or get involved. So that's kind of our core mission. But the other piece I wanted to mention tonight is that part of how we've supported that work, we work really hard to raise independent money. We're a nonprofit, started with 1 staff, like lots of folks, and a good idea. And we wanted to build power in a way where we weren't reliant on government funding, where we weren't reliant on foundations necessarily as much as possible, although there are some good ones out there, but we wanted to build an organization where we could decide, because our members wanted us to, let's put a staff person in Martinsville, Virginia, right? And like how many, there's not a ton of foundations that are, quite honestly, that are gonna fund the kind of work we're doing in Southside Virginia, or in far Southwest Virginia, or in Richmond. You know, it's kind of, we felt not just as a survival mode, but as kind of our definition of power, our members wanted to have some ability to control what we were doing fundraising-wise. Part of what came about is we were running into a lot of other people who were tangentially related. And probably that's why I've met a handful of you all, right? Like we're kind of doing some similar things. We think of our work mainly as organizing, but if we're doing our job well, we have to know other groups that are doing direct service, that are doing community education, because I can't help somebody necessarily today with their rent or with their utilities, right? But I need to know where to direct them if that's what they need in order to then become engaged with our work. So we are a big believer in borrowing and sharing power, and that there's a role for everybody, because we've got so much we've got to work on. There's no way any one of us can get it done alone. So out of that, we realized that this whole process around nonprofits and developing nonprofits in and of itself, and again, this is no surprise to you all because you're working to do this, a lot of you all in your spare time at night, you know, it's not an accessible process, or it hasn't traditionally been accessible, especially for the folks that we were working with, who have been left out of the process for lots of different reasons in the state. And so some of our board had the idea we could begin to accept grants and donations for other organizations, leave them their own autonomy as long as they had some mission alignment, right? We're not going to sign up an organization that is working to, you know, lessen access to the ballot, or we're not, you know, it's certainly something that has to have some mission goals that are broadly about empowering the community. But that instead of them having to have their own status, or if they knew that they might get there in 3 years, but they had a funder who was willing to give them a grant today, we could set up this process where it's technically a fiscal sponsorship. But in we call it a joint plan of work. And that's because we add this piece around, we ask our joint plans, hey, are you willing to make calls to a legislator? Or would you ever be willing to, you know, help raise money or to go speak with leaders on the work you're doing? Those aren't absolutely required to be a joint plan, but our goal is that this really is connected to what we're trying to do on the larger level. And so through that work, we also have been trying to be intentional about working with people like yourselves and like others who have a good idea, see a need right now that needs doing, but that for whatever reason either don't have the time or resources to like jump in and go full-fledged. We can be a bridge. We can do some of the behind-the-scenes work to help groups or to help individuals who have ideas to try to move things forward. So that's the other side of what we do. We've got about 50 groups right now that we work with. We work a lot with CNE. We work with different community foundations in Richmond. Will direct people to us. And again, we sometimes say, you don't need a nonprofit to do what you're doing, right? Like you're doing your own thing. You can figure it out, use some resources. But if it makes sense, we're trying to be really intentional as well about then asking, what kind of training do you need, right? Should we do some work on how to do grassroots fundraising? We just had a workshop with a bunch of our joint plans on grassroots fundraising. We've got one coming up on governance. How do you set up a board if you want to set up a board? How do you have accountability? And we offer this stuff as part of the work of being a joint plan of Virginia organizer. So that's how the long way of how I came involved with the Center for Civic Innovation as well, because I think you all have also identified this need, right? That there are folks out there and that we've got these systems that maybe aren't as accessible as they should be. And how can we, you know, connect some dots that help really good work get done? So that's what we do. I'd love your questions as well. I could probably ramble all night, but it really is about, and I think your projects, you're figuring this out too and have already figured out, trying to create a place for have people be genuinely involved, right? I tell people all the time, if you go in as the smartest person in the room, you're not going to learn anything. Somebody told me that years ago. And it's like, that's how we approach the work, right? We don't know at all everything that needs to happen. And we're not going to come in and say, hey, you have to work on this issue or that issue. But we want to ask people, what do you want to see changed? And also, what do you like to learn? And what we found is that people, when you do that, I was on a call earlier today where a funder wanted to, they're looking to fund this family raises work in the state. and they asked to do a virtual site visit, which I had never done before, so we had on Zoom, but it allowed me to invite all of our state governing boards, which is not a normal board of a nonprofit, right? These aren't wealthy, influential folks necessarily. These are people who are struggling to pay their own healthcare costs. These are people who got in because they had a predatory loan, and we were doing some work on predatory loans. Our vice chair is a returning citizen, and I have to write a letter every year to the state why he should be allowed to be on our board. Because they question, how do you have a returning citizen on the board? So directly affected folks to the top levels of our organization, and they shared their stories. They got on today and just shared why we're trying to do what we want to do. And time again, it was because somebody asked us. And I never knew there was somebody out here trying to do this work. So I think that's, again, if you can in any way, and I'm sure you're trying to already on your long list of things to do with each of your projects, but figure out ways to honestly be in a space. We also talk a lot about going first. If somebody asks us to come do something, yes. I tell my organizers all the time, yes, go out. We're not going to operate out of scarcity. We know that there are needs that need to be met, and that we've got some experiences that might be helpful, but so do a lot of people out there. So how can we figure out ways to honestly and actively engage with the community?
Yeah, so the question I was thinking about is, during this time of COVID, I've noticed there are a lot of people who had nothing better to do but think of projects. Did you find a sort of renewable projects, sustainability projects, and things like that going towards your office?
Yeah, I think, because of a lot of our work is relational in that, it's like if somebody has heard of us, they'll say, go check them out. So, a lot of our work came through the environmental space. People were facing some sort of development that they wanted to try to fend off, or things like that. And then that kind of bridged to other people they were running into. And so we have seen a couple of projects this year who are doing native plant development up towards Afton, and trying to figure out how to make that go, and can we figure out a cooperative structure. And so we have had a few of those come in. But again, sometimes if they're in town, we'd say, if you talk to Cultivate, or we used to work with UACC for years, right? And I had on, when I came into the director role in 2018, and one of the first things was we have a lease for UACC's garden spot and all that. We were just doing the behind the scenes stuff so they could figure out how to get seeds in the ground and grow, right? I don't mean to keep pointing at you, but I think of Cultivate as related. And the other thing about COVID is that we've also seen a lot more people who see very direct need, right? We had a lot of groups start to come in to talk about mutual aid. And there's no real nonprofit structure on mutual aid. And how do we try to raise money to actually get it directly to people in the community who need things? And we didn't find any easy answers. We were able to try to figure out some ways to ask questions and connect some people around mutual aid. So some on the sustainability, yes, but definitely, and again, part of it's because of the work we do in our other organizing world. We have a lot of members who were just hit by lots of different parts of this pandemic. And those folks were asking about ideas as well.
So you can take me as well. Okay, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Allison Wiederhold. I'm originally from Fredericksburg, Virginia. I'm currently living in Glen Allen.
And so what are you doing here today at PBCC?
I am here for the Center for Civic Innovation Fellowship meeting. I was able to meet other fellows today and introduce my project and learn more about some community collaborators.
How did you find out about this?
So I found out about this program actually through a student network that I'm a part of. I'm actually on PVCC's listserv for students, and they had advertised the CCCI fellowship. It sounded like something that was really interesting to me, and I decided to put forward an application.
So it's crazy, but I'll probably be halfway in here. But anyway, so I love PVCC. I love it because, first of all, the director. I think the director is really awesome in terms of focus on, careers and getting achievement, and also just being inspirational. And I wanted to know if you don't mind. How old are you?
I'm 26.
Oh my God, and you're doing all this. This is amazing. So, how did you feel inspired to do this?
So I am actually in a really interesting kind of point in my career right now. I'm a clinical team manager for an oncology clinical trial right now, but I am hoping to go to medical school. And I knew that I wanted to do more community engagement. I had been an EMT in Albemarle while I was in college. I went to UVA actually.
Yes.
And so
Did you get a lot of credits for college because you were an EMT?
No, it was all volunteer.
Yeah, but still, apparently, you gotta figure that out.
Yeah.
You can get credits for that.
Yeah, so I didn't get credit for it, but I did put in a lot of hours in Albemarle actually. Being an EMT and kind of getting out in the community, and I've worked in clinical research for 5 years now, and it's shown that there are definitely disparities in health inequities, and not all of the patients that I've seen and people in the trials that I work on look like me, and that was really frustrating. I said, this is obviously not representative of what everyone looks like and what healthcare really looks like. So I wanted to do something to get involved. I'm working part-time at VCU right now in a health equity lab, and it's great. We're recruiting patients. We've got lots of projects to involve people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds, different racial backgrounds. However, that's having to get patients into research, and people aren't always trusting of research, and it's requiring that people come in for extra visits. They come in and do, they have to see a doctor, they do all these things. But I wanted to do something kind of more hands-on and just directly in the community. So it's sort of where my idea for my project stemmed from. I'm really interested in healthcare. I'm really interested in expanding access to healthcare. So that's kind of how I felt from here.
Well, UVA is doing a really good job with their research right now. I mean, I can tell you I've been following like telemedicine and everything about their bioengineers and stuff like that. And for about 14 years, I've been going to UVA Data School.
Okay.
Palooza.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I've heard of this.
Yes, it's going to come up in November 9th. Anybody can go. You don't have to be anybody. I mean, you could be somebody.
Not here.
And they, break out in groups and stuff, and they have really great, they had, Google administrators, they had Google, that woman Google, whoever she is, the woman one, not Mark. She was there 1 year. They had the New York Times editor-in-chief, things like that. And what happens is they are talking about things like that all the time. Disparities, and it just became like so crystal clear during COVID. But in my 45 years of being a registered nurse, it was there from the get-go. And we fought as nurses all along to try to get more services to the community at large, and then all of a sudden, what happened was hospitals became profit. They said they're not profit, but they were, and then a lot of it, especially with a research hospital like UVA, it goes to the research and the patients. So, and then they never nurture the healthcare workers. And that really is a loss, because if you can keep somebody in a certain oncology or dialysis or whatever service for a long time, they're going to be able to tell you a lot of information. And so anyway, so that's been my sort of niche in terms of public health. Right now I'm doing CVS, I'm doing vaccines. I'm 65 years old. I could be really retired. I got a couple of pensions. I don't have to do anything. But like yourself, I can't sit at home. When you see something, you're like, but I can probably make this better.
Right, and that's what was really exciting about this organization and kind of the project in general is I've got a very rudimentary idea of what I want to do. I'm trying to figure out the steps of how to actually implement this and make it work and make it kind of like an ongoing project and something that can be spread even to other communities, not just within Charlottesville.
You are awesome. I have to tell you, you're awesome. You're only 26, and you're already understanding how you need to proceed in helping people.
I'm excited.
Awesome.
Thank you for being on Charlottesville Public Access TV.
Okay, bye.